Welcome to the ICE podcast, supported by the US Soybean Export Council, an initiative to enable the cold chain industry of India to be future ready.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for tuning in to the ICE podcast on cold chain technology. Welcome to our series of talks on cold chain technology and applications. When we hear the word Indian Armed Forces, our hearts swell with pride, and rightly so. Our armed forces have made every Indian proud of them. A deep respect and reverence has developed for the armed forces, whose actions speak of the highest qualities of leadership and dedication to the safety of our country and our countrymen and women. A soldier is required to exhibit tremendous courage, clinical thinking, and decision making, often working in extremely harsh environments, several times without any time limits to his operational duty. A duty that poses tremendous challenge to his physical fitness and mental preparedness. So it is of utmost importance that the armed forces get the right type and the right quantity of nutrition every day for their body and mind to take up these duties and challenges. To speak on this topic of how the armed forces gets their nutrition, especially the much required protein, and how that is connected to an unbroken cold chain, we have with us a highly decorated officer of the Indian Army. It is my honor to introduce you the speaker of today's talk, Lieutenant General Balbir Singh Sandhu, AVSM, VSM. Lieutenant General Balbir Singh Sandhu retired from the armed forces recently after a distinguished tenure of 39 years. In this period, he was appointed to the apex post of the Director General of Supplies and Transportation of the Indian Army. He headed a force of approximately 75,000 officers, junior commissioned officers, and jawans. Lieutenant General Sandhu was also appointed to the post of the Director General of Information Technology. As DGST, he managed an annual budget of approximately 8,000 crores, executing one of the biggest supply chain management functions for the Indian Army. As DGST, he was instrumental in introducing frozen poultry and meat products for the Indian Armed Forces by establishing a very elaborate and sustainable cold chain spread across the country, including its remotest corners. Post retirement, Lieutenant General Sandhu is actively involved with think tanks like the USI, IDSA, and others. He conducts seminars on logistics. He has written several articles in professional journals and newspapers, and he has submitted his PhD thesis on strategic studies at the Punjabi University, Patiala. A warm welcome to you, sir, and over to you for your talk.
I am going to speak today on the importance of protein and how the whole gamut of activities related to proteins and cold chain takes place in the Indian Army. Indian Army has a very methodical, systematic process by which we authorize the troops the food contents. It has to be a balanced diet, having due share of proteins and other components as advised by the dietitians and the doctors. Because a Jawan is expected to perform at a certain level of physical and mental fitness. Coming to the story of proteins, the army in India and the armed forces for that matter have had authorization of meat products pre-independence, right from the beginning. And when I was commissioned as a young officer, we had mutton as the basic item. And as time went by, you are authorized certain substitutes like chicken, pork. However, over a period of time, troops preferred chicken, poultry to any other item. So they are authorized other items. but poultry has become more or less the mainstay of the proteins for the Indian Armed Forces. Earlier, we had a system of butcheries at every station. So that is hundreds of stations where the mutton and the chicken was slaughtered daily and you are issuing fresh to the troops. It had its own problems of quality control and resources being utilized and hygiene as well because the cantonments have now come in the middle of the city. The idea of introducing frozen chicken and mutton started about 10 years back. We had the trials, we had certain pilot projects, but the whole issue as a authorization was finding a lot of resistance because there's always a resistance to change. We decided in the year somewhere around 2015-16 that after a feedback from the troops, uh, positive feedback for that matter, that we must introduce this as a basic item. There was a resistance for the existing players, but we could ultimately get the government to authorize frozen chicken as the basic item from the troops. Now came the game of storage, transportation, processing. So first thing that we put in place was that we need traceability for every piece of chicken and that is supplied by the suppliers. So we said we will register such people who have their own plant and who can certify the input or the chicks and the poultry from where they are buying or where they are sourcing it from. After that was the process of transportation. A system was evolved by which the transportation was the responsibility of the vendor, and there were transportation agencies which undertook that job. And you'll be surprised to know that certain vendors located in South India were able to supply at places as far as Manipur. And we also had a monitoring system where the cold chain was not broken even for a minute. And you had a real-time monitoring of the cold chain. Came the process of storage at the destination. We again had various models. One was that the army should provide the storage, and second was that it should be outsourced to the vendor. It is very interesting that the vendors evolved a method by which they had a freezing system designed in a manner that it came in the form of prefab components. And another agency started providing this storage facility, and they were given the land and the electricity connection, and the backup was theirs. So today, you have an absolutely integrated system where there is free flow of frozen chicken from places which are located very far away, and they go in a seamless manner with cold chain maintained through the journey as well at the destination. Another issue which was very interesting was earlier we had contract for each station, and I realized since you are transporting frozen chicken from far off destinations, it may not be economically viable for a vehicle to go and supply for a small quantity. So we grouped a number of stations which are in the same line. Say you take Jalandhar, Beas, Amritsar, Kapurthala, where it becomes economically viable for the vendor to depute a vehicle or a suitable vehicle. And since they have storage, he can store in one go for more than one issue. So the system of transportation, the system of quality control, and the system of storage at the destination